Genesis 3:15, talking about the enmity between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman, is actually raising a question that the rest of the Torah and the entirety of the Bible, both Old and the beginning of the New in the Gospels, is trying to answer. Let that sink in. We are continuing our journey in Genesis chapter 4. There is so much here. It's absolutely incredible. People oftentimes just gloss over these chapters, but we can't, because this forms the foundation and the background to the entire overarching narrative and divine drama of the scriptures. It's so important to be able to understand these things. And we are going to begin by looking at the start of civilization. Chapter 4 of Bereshit, Genesis, verse 17. And Cain was intimate with his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Enoch. And he was building a city, and he named the city after his son Enoch. And to Enoch was born Irad. And then it gives a list of a number of other individuals who were born in the line of Cain. So we see Cain started a family and he built a city, which is interesting because he was supposed to be a wanderer. But the question is, why did he build a city? Very important to understand this. He was unable to farm due to the curse for killing his brothers, so he builds a city instead and names it after his son, Enoch. And there's another Enoch we're going to look at. This is not the famous Enoch, but in Hebrew his name is Hanok. And Hanok comes from the Hebrew word chinuk, which means to educate. So we're going to see that's important. So Cain was kicked out of Eden, and he wanted to recreate his own utopia. Cain believed education, technology, and wealth could generate a man-made type of Eden. Think about that for a moment. So we see his son, Jabal, or Yaval in Hebrew, cattle breeding, Yuval, the arts and creativity, Tuval Cain, craftsmanship, weapons of war, and Lamech, it's believed in Jewish thought, creates a legal system, a society of order and justice, often not read that way, but that is what the Hebrew seems to imply. And you know what? We see this today in people who don't believe in God. They create a religion based on elite education and technology and wealth. And the reality is tech is actually becoming a new religion. And there's a remarkable faith in technology that it can cure the problems that we face in the world. And I think that's very significant. They believe there's going to be a complete breakthrough in the world like there's never been before. And they believe that technology can bring salvation and alter every aspect of history and change the fundamental nature of humanity by merging man and machine that ushers in a golden age and a utopia. That is a background for what's going to happen a lot in the end times. And so we see this, that the problem is that utopian ideology always fails. It never makes things better. It always makes things worse. And there are positive and negative aspects to technology. But this new tech religion that's proposed by people like Sam Altman believe that they can educate and engineer humanity out of the negative aspects of our nature. So tech is really a drive for power, but it has no soul or spirituality. And I think that's really significant because we see, just like the descendants of Cain, they were building a city that they were building was apart from God. And this goes back to these two seeds, the godly seed, the seed of the woman, and the ungodly seed, which we see embodied in the sinful descendants of Cain. So they represent the corrupt seed of the serpent. Cain's descendants, for the most part, don't walk with God. They walk in immorality and idolatry. For example, Lamech takes 2 wives, breaks with God's ideal in the covenant of marriage. One he takes, the rabbis tell us, to have children, and one he takes for pleasure. In fact, there's this idea that the wife for pleasure was given a potion that would sterilize her. And they begin to worship idols, and they use their tech and their skills not to serve God, but to serve idols and to serve themselves, to build their own type of false Eden, false utopia. And they build altars to idols. They use their skills to worship the stars in the heavens. They create weapons of war and destructions, not life and blessing. And where does this interpretation come from? It comes from what we read in Genesis 4:26, which becomes very foundational. It reads this: in the days of Enosh, the son of Seth, we read, then they began to call on the name of the Lord. Or it could be read like this: the name of the Lord became profaned. Now, this isn't the typical reading in your English Bibles. There's a Hebrew word there that can be translated as beginning, then man began to call on, or it can be read as then man began to defile, because the word for began is also the word for defile in Hebrew. So the way the rabbis read it is that man began to profane, defile, pollute, and desecrate the name of God in that day. So very interesting. It's basically man began to use polytheism and actually manipulate demonic powers to get this advanced technology, which we'll see is important. So we see this is very much like the time in which we're living today. As it was in the beginning, so is it going to be in the end. This technology, this trying to create a utopia, a city apart from God, we're seeing this play out today in new ways. Now, we go on to read about the genealogy of Adam, and there is so much here. It's so exciting. Okay, we begin by reading this. Ze Sefer Todot Adam. This is the genealogies of Adam. What's interesting here is that there's an important pattern in these genealogies, because often we think, oh, all these genealogies, they're boring. We kind of skip over them. But friends, you can't skip over the genealogies. The genealogies are so foundational and significant. And there's an underlying message that these genealogies send. Actually, there's several important points. Number one, the importance of the genealogies. All people, all nations create descendants. But the story of the world is advanced in greatest measure by the people of God. Or maybe more importantly, everyone creates things, but the people of God are the ones who birth history, the one who births events, who births God's will on earth as it is in heaven. So friends, your genealogy matters. It's the people of God who change and shape the destiny of the world in the way that God wants. But of course, there is more. The reason why the genealogies are so important, and actually the whole book of Genesis in a sense is structured around the genealogies, they function as structural markers, is that it goes back to underscoring the development of the promised seed of the woman versus the seed of the serpent. So what's the point I'm trying to make? The genealogies are actually messianic in nature. We have to understand this. The genealogies are important because they point to the Messiah. Genesis 3:15, talking about the enmity between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman, is actually raising a question that the rest of the Torah and the entirety of the Bible, both Old and the beginning of the New in the Gospels, is trying to answer. Let that sink in. It's from whom will the promised seed, the promised Redeemer, descend from? So the genealogies are actually narrowing the scope of the seed. It's going to come through Seth, not through Cain. It's going to come through Noah, not the other descendants of Seth. It's going to come through Shem, not the other children of Noah. It's going to come through Abraham, not the other descendants of Shem. It's going to come through it's going to come through Isaac, not Ishmael. It's going to come through Jacob, not Esau. It's going to come not through any of the other tribes of Jacob. He had 12 sons, but it's going to come through one in particular, and that is the tribe of Judah. Genesis 49:10. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. So every generation is asking, is this going to be the one through whom the promised seed is going to come? And we learn that it's a narrowing of the seed, and eventually it will come through the tribe of Judah, and then we'll see one family from Judah in particular. And how do we see this? Interesting. It's in the numbers, of course. In the Torah, there are actually a total of 13 toldot, these generations of, genealogies. But there is one more that is key in the Hebrew Bible, in the Tanakh. And that is the number 14, the 14th one, which we read about in Ruth chapter 4, verse 18, which talks about the descendants of Perez and connected to Ruth and Boaz. And ultimately through that line comes David. It's the 14th. It's the narrowing the line even further. One family, one clan within the tribe of Judah, and that's going to be David's family. It's amazing. Why is this connected to the number 14? Well, a number of reasons. Number one, 14 is the number of kingship. So it makes sense that the 14th genealogy is the one from whom the Messianic king is going to descend. 14 is a number of gold in Hebrew. Of course, gold and kingship go hand in hand. Think about the gifts of the wise men that they bring to Yeshua at his birth. 14 is the number of hand in Hebrew, yad. Well, it's the hand that holds the scepter of kingship. And maybe most significantly, 14 is the numerical value of David in Hebrew, alluding that kingship, 14, will come through David, 14, but there is still more. This ties into the New Testament. Remember, the genealogies are important. It's why Matthew opens with a genealogy. It's trying to show that all of the genealogies in the old were being fulfilled in the new. Very important. So when Matthew writes the genealogy of Yeshua, he breaks it into 3 sets of 14. Abraham to King David, 14. King David to Josiah in captivity, 14. King Josiah to Joseph, the father of Yeshua, 14. It is a selective genealogy crafted to highlight the number 14 because Matthew is spelling David, David, David. As we said, 14 is the hand of God. It's showing the hand of God in guiding the history of God's people, of the descendants, and of the Messiah who would ultimately bring about the redemption. I don't know about you, but I find that amazing. But of course, guess what? There is still more. We said 3 sets of 14 in Matthew. 14 times 3 is 42. Why is that important? Because the book of Numbers tells us that Israel makes a total of 42 stops in the wilderness. 14 times 3 from Egypt to the Promised Land. So 42 becomes representative of reaching an end goal. So the 42 stops in the wilderness are symbolic on a spiritual level of the journey that each and every one has to make throughout our life, the stages that we're going to go through over a lifetime, in order to prepare us to reach our end goal, which is the promised land of the world to come. Or we could say, again, the new Eden. The 42 stages of Israel's journey finds its culmination in the birth of Messiah Yeshua in the 42nd generation, who is the one who leads all people who place their faith in him into the promised land of eternal life and into the new Eden, the Messianic kingdom. I don't know about you, but I think it's amazing. All that in the genealogies, the entire gospel, the entire promise of the Messiah, right there.